of his deputies not too long ago.
Mr. Giggins.
Since this is me, I will respond. The way it works is, as I indicated earlier, if there are legal issues, factual issues, or equitable issues, those cases should be resolved. That is a decision that's reached by both the prosecution, the defense attorney, and the defense. Some cases have to be tried, and that's the way it is, whether they're felonies or misdemeanors. We certainly do not prioritize trying misdemeanor cases, but neither can we just dismiss them to facilitate people's desires. So that is the responsibility the people of this community have placed upon me, and that's the responsibility I intend to fulfill.
Mr. Hagan, would you like a chance to respond to this?
Why not? I'll weigh in, but avoid the last couple rounds there. I think the main thing is it's clear that, you know, finances really don't have any role in the decision of a prosecutor to go forward with the case. You've got to let the chips fall where they may. It may be something you think about from time to time in the misdemeanor cases, very low-level stuff, because sometimes the judges aren't going to give you much of a sentence if you bring somebody to trial and prove it. And I've had that happen. If the judge just doesn't think it's that important of a case, he's going to give you a very low sentence, if anything. So, and the reason is because the judge will think about the jails, and they'll tell you that. But that's really not what you should be basing your mind on at all. Your decision is the facts, the evidence, the ability to prove it, and the degree of harm and threat to the community. That's it, and that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Hagan. Now, we can all get back to this other question. Can you explain your beliefs as they pertain to the concept of checks and balances with your role as district attorney? And it looks like it's Mr. Gallegos.
It's tough to take that question as it relates to the district attorneys. I can tell you that the government of Humboldt County is split up like the state and federal government. We have three branches: the judiciary, the executive, and the legislative. The district attorney's office is the executive branch in Humboldt County. I am elected by the people of Humboldt County, but I am a state officer, and I get my authority from the people of the state of California, and the oversight from the governor and the attorney general. The checks and balances are already put in place by having the board of supervisors pass ordinances, act as the legislative branch for our county, write the check that allows my department and other departments to fulfill their responsibility to the community. And the judiciary acts as a check of what the prosecution's office does, because while I can prosecute people, I cannot convict anyone. Only people in California can convict people, or a judge if that defendant waives a jury trial. So the judge is a check of the authority that I've been given by the people, both in plea bargaining and in trials and in sentencing. So the checks and balance is a system of government that we initiated over 200 years ago, and it works well. And I support it, and frankly, without it, we would all be in trouble.
Thank you, Mr. Gallegos.
Thank you.
Ms. Bryson.
Can you repeat the question?
I can do that. You just find it here. Okay. Can you explain your beliefs as they pertain to the concept of checks and balances and your role as district attorney?
Well, as Mr. Gallegos said, there's three branches of government. I feel as if we're doing a little government class here. We have the lawmakers, which would be the legislature, and we, as the people, make the laws too, because we can get things on the ballot and vote. We have the executive branch, and that would be the DA's office to enforce the law. And we have the judiciary, which would be our courts, who interpret the law. And just like everyone said, you can get a conviction because a jury comes back, a guilty finding, but it's ultimately the court that sentences the person. And as Mr. Hagan said, the court can decide that it's not that important of a case, or based on the facts, do a lot lesser fine. The laws of DUI are pretty much set in stone as far as what the fines and the penalties are. So there's less discretion for the judiciary on that point. it's important, obviously, to have 3 branches so that none of the 3 get too powerful. If, for instance, the DA's office was making the law, enforcing the law, and interpreting it, then we would just basically have a tyranny, which is not what the United States is about. But other than that, and perhaps throwing in a bunch of other things I learned in government class, I'm not sure what else I can say.
Thank you, Ms. Bryson. Ms. Jackson?
Thank you very much. Going to be, try not to repeat too much here, but the checks and balances in the role of the district attorney. We've got the legislature that makes the laws. The executive has to enforce the laws that the legislature makes. And then you've got the judiciary in between that will decide questions of law. The district attorney should not be making policy. That is not her function. It is a role of the people. The district attorney should not be choosing which laws will be enforced and which laws will not be. That is the decision of the people of the state of California. Lately, I've been very troubled over the last few years, troubled and concerned that many cases, instead of going to juries for their determination, because they're really the trier of fact, that the district attorney has been usurping that role and making the decision that a trier of fact should. In cases involving the quality of evidence, they should always go to a jury. That is part of our checks and balances system, and it should be the jury that makes that ultimate determination.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Mr. Hagan?
Well, I think it's a fascinating question, and I'm glad somebody asked it. It's a very interesting one because the district attorney is in a unique situation within the checks and balances systems in America. The district attorney's office is not the executive branch of Humboldt County. It is one office of the executive branch. But when you're an attorney, you are an officer of the court. And so you are a member of the judicial branch simply by being an attorney. More than that, you're a governmental official. The district attorney enforces the laws, the chief law enforcement officer. So as a member of the executive branch, you go into the judicial branch as a member of it. You're an officer of the court. All attorneys are officers of the court, and the district attorney then becomes imbued with executive branch authority in the court system. So really what you've got, once the legislature has set the laws, you've got the district attorney who decides not merely not how to interpret them, but exercises his discretion in how to enforce them. You don't enforce every single law fully across the board. You make charging decisions every time a police report's in front of you. So having exercised your discretion, you decide to bring a case to trial. Where does the checks and balances lie then? This is an old system. The district attorney's office comes from the office of the Attorney General, which was in medieval England long before our colonists set foot on this shore. We are exercising the will of the sovereign, which is in America, in the people of the state, not in the king. So we're doing the king's in America, the people's business by bringing justice into the courts. We're straddling 2 systems at once. Once you're there, you've got all kinds of checks and balances, starting with proof beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury of one's peers. That is a very serious check on the attorney, the district attorney. If you go to the felony level, you've got the obligation that the district attorney has to put on a preliminary hearing against somebody accused of a felony, and the purpose of a preliminary hearing is to check the prosecutor for being overzealous. The burden of proof is lower at a preliminary hearing than it is at a jury trial. The reason is because the judge may think that the prosecutor's been overzealous. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hagan. Okay, let's move on to the next question. I'd like to ask Mr. Gallegos and the 3 candidates what they believe the top priorities of the Humboldt County District Attorney's Office are. And Mr. Hagan, please.
Thanks very much. I think this goes back to when you're in office, you have to make decisions, and that should be prioritized, and so what you should do is lay that out for people to understand. I put the DA's office into 3 levels, 3 categories of crimes. The first one is head and shoulders above everything else, and that is crimes of violence, crimes against persons and property, and I include within that level methamphetamine, as I described earlier, because of the nature of the drug, its effect on people's behavior, and its ripple effect, its cascading effect, how it goes all the way through the community. The district attorney is the chief law enforcement officer, is there to back up